Well, as the November elections approach, we at the Huckabee Show want to bring to you some guests and segments with a midterm focus to help you make the important decision of who to vote for. Mac Warner serves as West Virginia's 30th Secretary of State, and since taking office in 2017, he's been recognized throughout all the country for his innovation in cybersecurity and election preparation. We are going to need that more than ever heading into the midterms. That is for sure. He's also one of the 15 Secretaries of State who have signed a letter to President Biden asking him to rescind the executive order directing federal agencies to get involved in voter registration process at a local level. We're very happy to have him with us tonight. Would you please give a great big welcome to Mac Warner, Secretary of State of West Virginia. Mac, great having you here. Election security is on the minds of every voter because we just worry that our votes may not really be counted. Are you concerned about it across the country, and how do we fix it?
I'm very concerned, Governor. I would like to start with just a quick thank you to you and your team. Fantastic. Everything about this trip, coming down and being part of this, first rate all the way.
Thank you.
Second, my wife, Debbie, absolutely loves you and everything about you and everything you stand for.
You married well. I want you to know, Mac, you married well.
And the third thing real quickly is just your last week's show, you brought on Richard Casper, and he was in charge of Creative Vets. And for anybody that missed it, go back and look at that because you were honoring Purple Heart recipients.
Yeah.
And it hit me particularly because Deb's and my oldest son, Stephen, is a Purple Heart recipient. He was wounded in Afghanistan, traumatic brain injury. So paralleled Richard's story a little bit. This week, when he saw that segment, I've never seen him so enthusiastic and energetic to start to talk about his story. And it did take him about 3 years before he opened up to me. And my wife was listening to him on the phone with me, and she had heard things she had never heard before, just listening to Richard's presentation on your show. So thank you for doing that. Thank you.
What a beautiful reminder that this show does matter to people with things like that. And I know that's near and dear to your heart because you went to West Point, you served in the military, so it's something you're a part of. But to election security, you went and fought for this country and served this country so that we would have free elections. Now you're running the elections in West Virginia, but across the country. What are you worried about?
Well, I came out of Afghanistan after 5 years because I saw a woman who was brutally beaten to death there. And I'm like, I've been here for 5 years setting up a rule of law program. And here they are cheering, these men were cheering the death of this woman. I said, it's time to come back to West Virginia and apply my talents there. I was elected in 2016. And I immediately went to work. We've taken off 380,000 names from the rolls in West Virginia. And we only have about 1.1 million registered voters. So that's about a fourth. That's how bloated the rolls had gotten in my little state of West Virginia. Think about that nationwide, where we are. That's why I took election security as a top priority right from the very beginning. So I am concerned, and I'm very concerned with what happened in 2020. And it's about votes that came into the system outside the law. Okay, so I'm not necessarily saying unlawful, but they weren't lawful either. So if a vote came in through drop boxes of 100 ballots were dropped off and the state law only said you could drop off 2 or 10, or votes that came in after the election was over in Pennsylvania, 3 days after the election was over, when state law says they have to be in by the close of business on election day, those are votes outside the law. And we saw that in Michigan without signatures and those sorts of things, and addresses Arizona, Georgia. We had it in a number of states. And what the left wants us to do is say, nothing to see here, move on. Now, I think we need to go back and look at game film, like a football game afterwards. You may have won a game or lost, but you go back and review film to see what went wrong and what could be better. And that's what we all need to do. And that's why I support all these Secretaries of States that are running across the nation that are challenging or are looking at. We need to look at what happened in the last election so we get the next election right.
Gosh, I wish you were Secretary of State in all 50 states right now, because that perspective is honestly what we need desperately for voter security. Your state has also been right in the epicenter of attention because of Senator Joe Manchin, who this week shocked a lot of people by voting with Chuck Schumer and the far-left Democrats on this inflation bill. Mac, that's got to be a gut punch to the people of West Virginia.
It absolutely is, and that's why I proposed this last week, a SLAP. Joe Manchin needs a SLAP, S-L-A-P, State Legislative Accountability Pledge. Yeah. So what this is back at 1787, there was a great compromise when we were trying to formulate. We'd had this Confederation of the States, and it didn't quite work out. We needed to be able to raise an army and do taxes. So how are we going to have these sovereign states combined with a democratic process? So they came up with the House of Representatives would be the people's house, the U.S. Senate would be the state's house for the states.
Yeah.
And that compromise has allowed us to survive 233 years in a nice republic. And so senators should be tied to their states. The representatives are tied to the people every 2 years, and the senators are given a 6-year term. The problem is, in 1930, the original Constitution said the senators shall be picked by their legislatures.
Yep.
And that worked for 100 years. But in 1913, the 17th Amendment passed, and that made senators directly elected by the people. So they were just like the representatives. But what that allowed them to do was go to the swamp, go to D.C., and for 4 or 5 years just ignore their people back home. And in election year, then they'd show up and start being accountable again. Well, what this pledge is, it says that any time a senator gets a 2/3 vote of no confidence from their state legislature, then they need to resign their seat, okay? So the repeal of the 17th Amendment...
That would be a beautiful thing. It would change the country. It truly would.
It would. In fact, it was best described by Justice Scalia to one of his friends, a guy, Dick Salisbury. And Dick said, Justice, what's it going to take to restore this country? And Justice Scalia said, we're not going to restore it until we return the appointment of senators by their state legislatures. And what that does is it ties, the Senate is supposed to represent the state. In fact, back in the original time frame of the Constitution, they started talking about these being ambassadors for the state rather than senators. Now, they decided on the word senator, but if you have that concept of an ambassador, the ambassador from Virginia or the ambassador from Pennsylvania going to D.C. to represent their state, and that's what we need to do. So what this pledge would do, if I could get Senator Manchin to take it, is if he does what he did last week and side with Schumer and Pelosi, that's the swamp, the Democrat Party, the left, the progressives. Think about that. Tell me this. Who do you think in West Virginia supports 87,000 new IRS agents?
Nobody.
Nobody.
Yeah.
He negotiated with Chuck Schumer for 3 months to get this deal done. How many times do you think he talked to the president of the West Virginia Senate or the Speaker of the House? 0. And so that's why today, State Senator Randy Smith just put out a call to Senator Manchin, said, please come back to the state of West Virginia and explain to us your thought process on this so-called inflation reduction bill.
Wouldn't that be a change of scenery for sure? You know, Mac, I just can't tell you enough how much I appreciate your leadership on this. I hope it catches fire in all the states. I'd love to see the 17th Amendment repealed. It would help America get back on its feet. You got to promise to come back because I love what you're doing for the people of West Virginia and, quite frankly, for the rest of America as well. And thank you. We hope your message gets out there. Now, for our audience, as always, if you visit Huckabee.tv, we will connect you to Secretary Mac Warner and the work that he's doing in West Virginia and the work that we wish he was doing in all 50 states.